moms for liberty, concerned mothers or domestic extremists? Well, I would say probably just concerned moms, but who am I, right? I just have a podcast. So the Daily Wire had a story that got us interested in talking to Moms for Liberty on the show. The headline, exclusive, Moms for Liberty called a hate group in Massachusetts police trainings. So in Massachusetts, where there's like 20,000 law enforcement officers, the training they were getting at the state level identified Moms for Liberty as a hate group. And so when they were being trained with how to deal with, hate group and domestic extremists like the KKK or the white supremacists or whatever it is, Moms for Liberty. And it's just crazy. And I'm sure there were a ton of police officers getting that training like, what are you talking about? Moms of Liberty for Liberty, of course, was a group that was born out of the pandemic and this frustration that parents had when they started to realize what their kids were being taught at school, because now their kids were having school at the kitchen table. And they wanted to make sure that parents and moms continue to have a say in their child's education, that radical ideology wasn't being pushed on their kids at school, and that all of a sudden made them a hate group. So on Sundays with Subscribers yesterday, we had on Sarah Gerriette, who I just adore. She gives us a ton of great tips for the show. She is the chair for Moms for Liberty, Pierce County, and she talked about sort of this real, for her, just bewilderment that moms like her would be treated as extremists.
I'm a fourth generation Washingtonian, raising a fifth. This is how we've always lived free. You could always speak your mind and do things. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and you have the Biden administration, of course, the FBI saying parents are the domestic violent extremists. And then you have our AG at the time, now our governor, he had this whole domestic violent extremist bill that he was trying to get across for 1333. I went down and testified against that. Then they put up the slide saying this is what a domestic violent, it wasn't Antifa or anybody like that. It was if you question elections, if you speak at school board meetings, all the things. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, so the moms are the extremists. And in Washington state, no different than Massachusetts. I mean, she mentioned the Domestic Violent Extremism Task Force and some of what they characterized as extremist behavior. And it was like parents showing up to school board meetings. And meanwhile, they totally ignore the very clear common occurrences of domestic extremism in Antifa and the far left and the pro-Hamas faction. That's not a problem. But moms showing up to school board meetings and demanding a better educational outcome for their child, that makes you an extremist. Not to mention all the other very extreme behaviors that Washington state leaders and the superintendent of public instruction are either perfectly fine with or ignore. One example, we had the story recently from the Sumner Bonnie Lake School District, where outside an elementary school, they hosted a drag show where they had this performer reenacting Rocky Horror Picture Show in lingerie, a dude in lingerie, tiny underwear, like bending over for kids, doing the spready and performing for children outside an elementary school, a public elementary school. And you see stuff like that, and then we speak out about stuff like that, and we're the extremists. Like, I was protested by people holding signs calling me a transphobe for supporting parental rights. And then this story, when we covered it a couple weeks ago with the drag performers doing spreadies around children in their underwear, you look at my social media, the alphabet mob was out in full force, painting me as a hateful bigot for saying like, hey, I don't care if it's a man, a woman, drag, not drag, no panties and underwear around kids. And so Sarah and I talked about like, how do we change hearts and minds when you have such a large segment of our state's voting aged population that defends things like this? It was insane, the number of people defending it and calling me a hateful bigot. It was like overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a little shocking.
And so I guess I struggle sometimes with how do you fix that?
Again, how do you speak up for the children?
Yeah.
And that's my mindset always, like, yeah, these people, these parents or whatever, but it's the kids, and that's not okay. And you know it when you see it, don't you?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, you know it. When you see it, you know it. And you say, yeah, that's not okay. And I think the vast majority of people feel that way. But then you're going to have a few online who are going to come after you, who are going to be vocal about it. But I still believe that the vast majority of people believe in the innocence of children and want to protect that. And that's why we keep waking up every day and doing what we do and say, be like a duck and let those, things slide off your back. Call me all the names. These are children. And the answer is no.
These are children, and the answer is no. I love that. So simple. You can watch that full interview, undividedpod.com, by becoming a subscriber, undividedpod.com. We do in-depth interviews like that every Sunday on Sundays with subscribers, and Sarah was just awesome. And she has been behind some of the greatest tips that we've gotten about radical ideology being pushed on kids at school and stuff. So no, Moms for Liberty isn't a hate group, you insane lunatics. They're parents who care about their kids, not you guys, of course, I'm talking about the others. It's just crazy how you can let Antifa assault people in broad daylight, destroy cities, burn things. They're not the domestic violent extremists, moms are. Got it. Great stuff.